Hello everybody, I'm just some guy and today I'm going to talk about Rich Johnston's article on Bleeding Cool. I have this really bad habit of distrusting media sources. This started with Fox News and bled over to MSNBC and CNN, and now it affects everything I read. Even when I think something's true, I check 5 different sources. If somebody's quoted, I try to find the full quote in context. I just don't take anybody's word for it anymore, and folks like Rich Johnston are why. So, Rich Johnston of Bleeding Cool wrote an article where he claimed that most Marvel writers are conservative. Seriously. Seriously, Rich Johnston. You had nothing better to do with your day, did you? You couldn't have a snack, no procrastination, you couldn't just take your ass to bed. You had to write this bullshit. So he wrote this. I know you should never get involved in entrenched arguments on Twitter against a crowd of people who disagree with you. I know that in my head, but at 10 p.m. on a Monday night when I should be offline, sometimes there is no other choice. But there is a choice, Rich. You don't have to respond. You want to. And he goes on, he says, which is how I found myself arguing with someone who stated that Marvel wouldn't hire conservative writers based on the fact that he couldn't find any one of them who voted for Trump and expressed that on their social media, saying this. And he quotes John Delarose, a conservative novelist and comic book writer. Delarose tweeted, "Let me know when one Marvel writer comes out of the closet. I'll happily celebrate that." And Rich said in response to that, most writers are fairly conservative, apart from Alice Cott, and he's gone. Not a single Marxist among them. It's depressing. Oh, Rich. How can you tell a lie like that? How stupid do you think people are? We can go to the writer's Twitter feed, man. We can see what they tweet all on their own. Delarose is right. If you go to their website, I don't know any current Marvel writers who tout conservative views. There's got to be some conservative writers at Marvel, but they keep it to themselves. And I wonder why. Now, Rich writes, the original poster was defining conservative as a Trump-supporting, pro-gun, anti-gay marriage, anti-socialized medicine, anti-abortion, and I wanted to define conservative a little wider. Certainly there are plenty of conservatives, even as defined by America, who did not vote and do not support Trump. But the church is a lot broader. Stuff like that gets my warning flags up. So I clicked on the Twitter feed, quote, and it turns out that the exchange started with Delarose talking about harassment he received because of Bleeding Cool article. This article, written by Rich, was a response to a post that Delarose did on his blog. Delarose wrote about the lack of diversity in the comic book industry. Now, he wasn't talking about identity politics diversity, but the lack of political diversity among Marvel creators. I remember this post, mostly because Delarose had looked at a bunch of Marvel writers' Twitter feeds, and he had reported what they regularly posted. And he says on his blog, according to Marvel.com, there are 18 writers on the current releases. I went through each and every one of their Twitter accounts to give a summary of where they spent their time on social media in terms of politics. I don't mind people getting political occasionally, or even necessarily holding left-wing views. But when it's constant beating of the drum of anger and hate, that's what makes an SJW, and that's where one needs to stay away, and it is a primary reason for Marvel's steep sales decline in recent years. Here's a brief summary of the writers' Twitter feeds as I've gone through all of them for you. Now, it turns out that there are more writers at Marvel than these initial 18, and Delarose created a second post on his blog going through their Twitter feeds as well. But for the sake of brevity, I'm just going to go through the ones from the first list, and I'll link both of them in the description. Now, Rich Johnston got some Twitter feedback for his ridiculous claim. Here's one he quoted. Words have no meaning. I'd love to see the reaction of Marvel writers when Rich Johnston tells them they're conservatives. To which Rich says, challenge accepted. But we don't need to listen to Rich's lies. What we can do is what Delarose did and just look at the writer's Twitter feed. That would tell us whether any of these folks are conservative or consider themselves conservative. So here's the list from Delarose's first blog post about it. Delarose focused on the writer's anti-Trump posts, but also mentioned their other political themes that appeared in the feed. So I'm just going to read them in order. It starts with Mike Costa, anti-Trump post. Jason Aaron, anti-Trump has hashtag resist Greenpeace retweet from inauguration. However, he doesn't post politically very often, not pushing some anger crusade all the time. Brian Michael Bendis, anti-Trump post, but posts so much it's not a large percentage of his tweets. Cullen Bunn, rabid anti-Trump. Becky Cloonan, a couple of snarky anti-Trump posts pre-election, but no political posts since. From the feeds appears to be the status of the Marvel staff. Greg Duggan, constant anti-Trump post, retweets Bernie. He can still win. Al Ewing, British, and doesn't seem to post a lot of American politics, but very heavily steeped in globalism and immigration rights in his post. Anti-Western civilization. Roxane Gay, constant rants about feminism, anti-Trump posts. Zach Gorman complains about Republicans as joke, but only one recent post as such, low percentage of political tweets. Derek Landy, anti-Trump, not overwhelmingly political in posts, mostly sticks to posting about writing. Kate Leth, regular anti-Trump posts, constant complaints about some boogeyman privilege, rambles at racist, sexist, etc. white dudes, rants about queer issues. Stuart Moore, regular post anti-Republican, anti-Trump. Greg Pak complains about representation of different races, lots of anti-Trump posts. Dan Slott, anti-Trump rants all the time. Charles Soule, constant anti-Trump rant. Nick Spencer rants about Trump/Republicans and calls anyone who disagrees with him flat out evil. G. Willow Wilson, Muslim Ms. Marvel writer, rants about anti-Trump posts all the time. Chip Zdarsky, constant anti-Trump post. Now, there are plenty of conservatives who don't like Trump and trash him all the time, but having looked at some of these writers' feeds, I can verify that Della Rose is right, that these writers are not conservative. I can tell that not only because of what they tweet, but also because of what they retweet and who they follow. These folks overwhelmingly support far left-leaning people online. Don't take my word for it. Go to their Twitter feeds, don't contact them or talk to them. Look at what they tweet. These folks have extreme political positions, constantly attacking anyone who has different opinions, blocking anyone who dares to challenge them, and seem content only to deal with like-minded folks. So when Rich says there is an argument that strong conservative voices, as defined by current American politics, don't get hired at Marvel, and this is why Marvel Comics is failing, but strong left-wing voices aren't being hired either, he's full of shit. He goes on to say that G. Willow Wilson isn't a strong left-wing voice, which is nonsense, but fine. Let's give it to him. How do you explain Roxane Gay and Ta-Nehisi Coates? They are, without question, uber progressives. And they were hired because of their politics, since neither one of them has any background in writing comics. So how do you explain them, Rich? Now, he goes on to try to weasel his way around this by saying, as for allegations that increased attempts to portraying diversity at Marvel as some kind of left-wing plot, it is worth recalling that the biggest cheese at Marvel Comics, Chairman Mike Perlmutter, is a devout hardline conservative, having given millions of dollars to Republican candidates and is a member of Trump's administration. And he personally ensured the Spider-Gwen character, created for the Spider-Verse crossover, got her own book. Well, that sounds like a lie, and it is. And it's one Rich couldn't keep going for long, because he follows up and says, okay, it may have been to preempt Sony from developing a similar character for a movie, but that's the thing. They're doing it for money. Oh, for the love of... Do you realize that the words you use actually mean things, Rich? If they did it to preempt Sony, then it wasn't for money, Rich. Now, I don't know the rules with Sony and the Spider-Man characters, but there's really nothing stopping Sony from developing a Spider-Gwen character if they want it. They have the movie rights to Gwen Stacy, and if they wanted to give her spider powers, they could do that and just avoid doing anything from the Spider-Gwen comics. But, this business decision crap doesn't fly. Rich claims, a business attempting to widen its consumer base to appeal to more potential readers by trying all manners of things, investing in research and development to discover what works and what doesn't. Taking risks, showing entrepreneurial spirit, sometimes failing, but along the way getting hits with the mighty Thor, Black Panther, and Ms. Marvel. First things first, do you read what the fuck you write? Jesus Christ, this is the second time I've read an article from Bleeding Cool where no human could have written this. It's just proofread your shit before you post it. People are trying to read this and say it and get it out their mouths, and they can't because it's worded so fucking poorly. 2. Feminist Store is largely hated by the majority of the fan base, and the book has lost 70% of its initial orders since it launched. Ms. Marvel is on the verge of cancellation, something Rich posted about a couple of months ago. Black Panther is an utter failure, with the core book losing about 65% of its initial orders from issue 1 to issue 2, and now it's down by almost 90%. The two tie-in books both got canceled within the first month of release. So maybe hits isn't the word you're looking for, Rich. You might want to move that S to the front of the word. That'd be a more accurate description of those three titles. But let's get back to this claim that most of the Marvel writers are conservative. He goes on and says, everyone has their own perspective, and everyone sees themselves as the center of reasonable opinion, defining others in relation to themselves. So if you start from a position as a strong conservative, most people hired are going to be to the left of you. And that's just not fair. Except, Rich, most of the people doing the hiring at Marvel don't define themselves as strong conservatives. Most of them are to the left, either left of center or progressive outright, and they appear to hire along those lines. They don't seem to go after conservative writers, they don't seem to have conservative or even moderate views in their comics, and they don't seem to promote any characters who might be conservative. So, Rich, your whole claim is a total lie. I get that you're trolling for the clicks and the outrage, but really, you're just embarrassing yourself and your site. You're basically admitting that you're using Bleeding Cool to shitpost. So why should anybody take anything you write seriously after this? You're lying, and it's embarrassing. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.